All right, so welcome back, everyone, or welcome if you have not been to a bylaws committee meeting before, bylaws review committee meeting, I should say. We met over the summer and made additional headway. We are actually nearing the very end now. Last time we went through sections 9 through 11 and actually started Article 12 amendments, but did not get to a final resolution then, so decided to keep it open. So that's where I wanted to pick up today. So the amendment section, the red lines as currently drafted are, well, the way it currently reads now, or maybe let me start with how it read before I marked it up. So originally, everyone could see my screen, right? Yeah, okay. Before it said these bylaws may be amended by a majority vote of the members of the board after at least 10 calendar days written notice to the membership of the board, setting forth the proposed amendments. So currently, I think that sentence is just cleanup at the moment. These bylaws may be amended by a majority vote of all board members after at least 10 calendar days written notice to the membership of the board, setting forth the proposed amendments, and then added a sentence, I believe, based on our conversations last time, although I have to be honest, I don't have a complete recollection of everything we spoke about back in August. But the next sentence reads, bylaws amendments shall be reviewed by the executive committee for comment prior to being presented to the full board. My recollection as to one of the hangups we were having back in August as to this section was whether we wanted to keep in majority vote of all board members versus just a quorum. Majority vote means that in order to be amended, we basically would need 26 members to approve it rather than our typical just needing a quorum at a meeting. I don't recall if there were any other issues up in the air. Anne, Joanne, Sean, if anyone recalls if there's anything else that we wanted to confront regarding this section, but that I remember was something we were definitely in the middle of discussing last time. So now, no. I cannot see if anyone has their hand up. I will try to figure that out. But if anyone,
I'll just jump in and say that I think that
Yeah.
you've definitely clarified the context correctly. It was a matter of whether it was just going to be a majority of board members present where they were presented at the board meeting at which they were presented, or if the board wanted the amendments to only go through with a majority of the full board, 26 when we have a full complement, 24 right now.
right. Okay. Yeah, and I think, I think there is some logic to requiring the majority vote of all members, if we're going through the process of amending the bylaws, but of course that's it just means it's a larger hurdle than what we're used to with regard to votes, but I believe that's based, that's the language as it currently exists. So certainly, that's how things are going to need to work to amend the bylaws currently, I believe. I see Glenn has his hand up, but before that, I just wanted to welcome folks who joined since we started, I guess. Hi, Florencia. Hi, Nicole. Hi, Shahid. Hi, Wakil. Welcome everyone to the Bylaws Committee meeting. Go for it, Glenn.
As I'm thinking about this, I'm starting to revise my thinking on this. So I was first thinking that, a majority of whoever shows up, provided you allow for proxies, would be sufficient. But now I'm starting to think amending the bylaws is a fairly serious thing, and maybe we should just stick with the full majority.
We also have a no proxy clause in our voting part of the bylaws, and I believe that the no proxy comports with the city charter and the open meetings law, so we have to have it. No proxies.
That means that we have to have at least, in this case, you say 24 people will show up, and all 100% of them have to vote for something to make an amendment, pretty much.
Glenn, just for context, I could look back at votes that we've had at public hearings, after public hearings, at full board meetings. I can look at our history of voting, but I feel pretty sure that this is true. We tend to have well more than, a quorum, and our board tends to defer to the recommendations being made by a committee. So I would say most of our votes pass by a majority of the full board. And I could look in, I can quantify that for you. And I agree that this is a big deal.
Okay, but I'm revising the way I'm thinking, and I think that it should be a big deal. It should be important, and a lot of people show up before we do an amendment. So I think I like it the way it is. I'm not sure I'm crazy about the exact language, but the idea of a majority vote, I think, makes sense. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else want to weigh in as currently constitute? Oh, I see. Anne's hand is up. Anne. I think you're on mute, Anne.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't recall exactly what section it is, but the way this reads, after at least 10 calendar days, written notice to the membership of the board setting forth, and then, but prior review by the executive committee for comment prior to being passed to the board. Isn't there a section in this that says that it stipulates 10 days notice to the board? So once, I guess I'm uncertain if there's a conflict between this notice of 10 days and from the time that bylaws are brought forward, that they have to be brought to the board in 10 days. So how does that 10-day period allow for the executive committee to very quickly review it if it's 10 days to go to the board? Do you recall that section, Steve?
The only notice section I recall is regarding letting folks know about meetings. There's like a 5-day. There was a 5-day requirement for like special meetings, and then there was a 3-day requirement for regular meetings. Though I think we're proposing to change that to 5 days as well. So I don't remember there being a notice requirement for something like this. I will say that at least the way it reads now and the way I understand it is basically the way the second sentence is operating is it seems like that has to be done before the 10 days written notice. So the executive committee has to review the proposed amendments before they're presented to the board. So the bylaw basically go to the executive committee first and then give the notice to the board members with at least 10 calendar days written notice.
Okay. I'll look and see if I can find it. You're probably right. Thank you.
Yeah, I would do some control Fs, but I feel like, I don't want to give anyone, go crazy as I'm, going through this Word document. So if you wouldn't mind looking on your end, I'd appreciate it.
Another question.
Yeah, Glenn.
So the way this reads, if I choose to put in an amendment that says that at every monthly meeting, I must be fed a steak and lobster dinner, there is no way to stop that it has to then go to the executive committee for comment. And they may say this is not a great idea, but then it still has to go to the full board for vote, the way this is written. Right? We don't have any minimal standards of requesting an amendment.
Yeah, I feel like this came up maybe at the last meeting. You know, whether there should be a restriction on what can be proposed. I feel like we went down this road before. So
Has to be what has to be proposed, but that a minimum of 5 board members have to sign off on an amendment or something along those lines. Some minimal standards, not that just one person comes up with some crazy idea and we have to go through this exercise.
yeah, I'm just trying to refresh my memory if there's any other provision that deals with this. I don't think so. I think our discussions of amendments all came within this within that section. But if I'm misremembering and someone remembers something different, but now that you mentioned this, Glenn, I think that was part of the discussion last time in terms of whether there should be any sort of gatekeeping process. So I'm glad you brought that up and we can discuss that. Sean, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think the additional part of that conversation was whether or not there should be some sort of time standard for bylaws review every 5 years or something like that. But I don't think that there's any precedent for individuals being able to sort of propose a bylaw. I thought that anytime there was going to be a bylaws amendment proposal, it would have to go, the chairperson would have to appoint a bylaws committee. Do I have that confused? And I thought that the bylaws, the sentence about the executive committee I thought there was going to be an executive committee review of all of these changes before it went to the full board, which seems onerous and unprecedented as well, that other committees don't have to get a executive committee review before their recommendations go to the full board. So now I guess that does straighten up that confusion, that this executive committee clause was specifically for additional amendments to the bylaws after a bylaw committee review has been accepted.
But it doesn't, it just says comment. So that's why that sentence is not so good. So all the executive committee can do is comment on it. It can't stop it from going to the full board for a vote the way this is written.
So Glenn, you would have the executive committee basically being a gatekeeper to stop if they think some amendment is totally isn't worthy of being presented to the full board?
No, I'm not saying that because I don't think that's correct either. But I do think there has to be a minimum of some sort before something can initiate this process. So if any member comes up with some idea and it gets a minimum number of signatures of other members, then it goes to the full board for to the executive committee for comment, and then to the full board for a vote. But the board, the executive committee, I don't think should have the ability to say we don't like this and not take it to the full board for a vote. But one person should not be able to trigger this unless it's written someplace else, and I don't recall that, but I did miss a meeting or two, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Some sort of a minimum.
I hear what you're saying, Glenn. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It is an interesting, good point. Just to, you know, if there's some someone who's just trying to be a troublemaker and yeah, filling up the docket with a whole lot of amendments that aren't going to pass. I hear what you're getting at. Joanne, you have your hand up.
Hi, thanks. So usually what comes out of any committee is a recommendation, not a comment. So that would be the first thing that I change. If we're going to use the mechanism, it would be a recommendation. And sometimes committees don't come to a recommendation, and often a recommendation doesn't get approved through a full board. And I think that Glenn's concern has merit, that there should be some kind of I don't like the word gatekeeping, but there has to be a minority interest in creating an amendment that will bring the amendment to the executive committee. If this is the process of the workflow we're thinking about. Thanks.
Thanks, Joanne. So what, I mean, if we say these bylaws may be amended if proposed by, if supported by, at least 5 board members, like what would make folks comfortable that, like so having a certain number of, board members that are in support of an amendment, needed before it comes before a vote?
I mean, perhaps 25% of the board could support an amendment, and then it would go to the executive committee for a recommendation.
That's about 12. That's a pretty big number. Seems to me if somebody comes up with something that's really wacky and they can get 4 or 5 other people to go along with it, well, that's not so wacky, right? You may get one other person to come along with something really nutty, but to get 4 or 5 or 6 other people to go along with it, it's got to have some amount of merit. Either that or we've got a real problem with the membership on the board.
My recollection of, oh, I'm sorry, I'm jumping in. I see Greg Alvarez has his hand up. I'll wait to be called on.
Oh no. Sorry.
Right.
Go ahead. I can.
Steve,
John, you want to go first and then Greg?
Sure. Just my recollection of we can maybe refer to Robert's Rules of Orders on this. I think that there might be like this question has been answered in some document. So, but I think my recollection is there has to be an amendment. There has to be a motion for the board to consider an amendment, and then the board passes the motion for consideration, and then it goes to a review committee, which is usually a bylaws committee. Then it gets reviewed there. Then that committee would make a recommendation on that amendment and bring it back to the full board. So I think, Glenn's lobster dinner probably wouldn't pass the first part for consideration, whereas something with substance would. I believe that's how it works, and I don't have my copy of Robert's Rules or Jonathan Judge on the hotline, but I think that's it.
Well, if there is such a thing, then maybe we should refer to it.
Yeah. I mean, we do say Robert's Rules fills in the gaps, but the way this is written, someone could easily read it the way you're saying, Glenn, where they could just propose something, and there's nothing in there that says it's got to go to a bylaws committee. So yeah, your concern is well taken. Greg, did you have something?
I mean, yeah, I think that's a good point with the Robert Rules guidelines, and that's great. I was just wondering, it just, to me, it would depend on how open the process should be in terms of who can bring proposals. So so who would originate it? So it could originate from a board member. It could originate from someone from the public. It could originate from the executive committee. So yeah, for me, I guess the question would be how to feed all of those divergent possibilities. If it's fed through the executive committee, then it could be sort of a system, say, like the Supreme Court. It's like you don't need a Supreme Court to hear a case. It's like you don't need the majority. You need, I forget what the number is, maybe 3. That would entertain the proposal, but it would just, the mechanism should be to be able to account for all of those eventualities. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks.
May
Another hand up. Hold on.
Shahid
Shahid? Yeah. Hi, Shahid.
Yes, thank you very much, and greetings from me. And I just want to share with my thoughts that I am attending this meeting or always be the part of bylaws committee with the image that we are just sharing our ideas and we are sharing our opinion, and we are come to an opinion that we can recommend a suitable amendments in this bylaws, and after that we able to come with the majority vote and we approved that amendments. So I think we are not approving anything. We are just making a opinion and making a recommendation for a larger bench or larger our full bench. So after that, they decide. So what amendment is able to approve, or what amendment is take some more review. So this is my thinking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shahid. Okay, I appreciate that. I see Florencia has her hand up.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I was just
Hi.
saying, I think in the Robert's rules, they said wasn't to make it so easy that, you know, it could be easily amended, the bylaws, and not so difficult that, you know, it goes through a tedious process or something to that effect. But there should be something put in place. I agree that shouldn't make it that easily as Glenn was saying, to be easily changed, or, you know, for any whim to say, okay, we need to change the bylaws, since it's supposed to be what the board is governed by in some sort of a way. Thank you.
Thanks, Florencia. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think Glenn, like I said, Glenn's point is well taken. I quickly tried to Google Robert's Rules of Order bylaws amendments and try to just see if I saw anything that filled in gaps. And I didn't spot anything, and quickly Googling or quickly skimming. Although I did see, a 2/3 vote is standard, so our majority vote of the full board and requiring more of a quorum probably does make sense, going back to that issue. But I guess, if we're on board with this idea that more than one board member needs to propose an amendment, or there's got to be some sort of signature process, what what is the mechanism that we think makes the most sense here to throw in? It seems like this could be dealt with in a sentence, if this is what we think is appropriate, which it sounds like we do. So do we just have to say, this whole process relies on having the amendment having the support of at least, Glenn said 25%. That does seem, there's the problem with one being too few, but maybe 12 being too many. I don't know. It seems like, if someone has a good idea for an amendment, do they need to go around and get, get support from so many other board members? Sean, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think that's where that executive committee sentence sort of came from. So I just a suggested sentence, and see if it comports with how we're thinking about it right now as a group. Recommended bylaws amendments shall be approved by a majority, at a majority of board members, assuming there's a quorum at that meeting, reviewed by the executive committee and brought back to the full board for majority of the full board vote.
Say that one more time. I just want to process it.
Recommendations of I can type it in too. Recommended bylaws amendments shall be approved by a majority at the full board meeting, assuming quorum, reviewed by the executive committee, and brought back to the full board as a recommendation for approval. And brought back to the full board for approval.
So basically, anyone can propose an idea, but have a motion for amending the bylaws, but the process wouldn't get started if there's not a majority vote on it by the board initially, is what you're suggesting?
That's what I'm suggesting, that there's sort of that you wouldn't propose an amendment and have that amendment approved at that very meeting at which it was proposed. It'd be proposed, The proposal would be supported by the full board. It would be reviewed by the executive committee and then come back to the full board for, with all of the language done, because we wouldn't want to have a version of the bylaws committee meeting at a full board meeting. It would have to be reviewed and the language would have to be vetted and then brought back to the full board for a vote.
Okay, that's an interesting proposal. Joanne, do you have any thoughts about this or otherwise?
So I was just going to read you what Robert Rules of Order said. So chapter 1, which is the deliberate assemblies and its types and their rules. And this is section 2, paragraph 25, subsection 4. So the term bylaws as used in this book refers to this single combination type instrument by whatever name the particular organization might describe it, which includes all rules that society considers so important that they A, cannot be changed without previous notice to the members and the vote of a specific large majority, such as two-thirds vote, and B, cannot be suspended with the extension of clauses that provide for their own suspension. So according to Robert Rules, it's a two-third vote, not a simple majority. So the amendment of the bylaws would have to be a two-thirds majority vote.
Well, our bylaws, we don't necessarily have to follow Robert's rules for everything, right?
No, I'm just giving you what they're, so it cannot be changed without previous notice to members and a vote of large majority. So that's the summation.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. Thanks for finding that, Joanne. Nicole, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I liked, if I understood Sean's suggestion correctly, I liked it because just feel like it's really, if you're, you could be a newish board member and have like a really great idea. You could be sort of a shy board member. It's also quite hard actually to communicate with like this entire board over email. I don't know most of your personal addresses, for instance, and it's actually quite hard to get them. So I like anything that allows someone to make a proposal in a way that doesn't involve schmoozing, right? Like you don't have to be comfortable being like, okay, which 5 people am I gonna, yes. Which 5 people am I going to approach about this? So I like anything where anybody could raise anything, but the whole board, they can get tough feedback at the same time.
I'm tinkering with language based on Sean's proposal. I felt like if we're going this route, what we have was a little out of order, so I will try to come up with something. And while I'm doing that, and if you want to chime in with any thoughts.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify what I think Sean was saying. So well, I'm unsure, there are a few points here. So one is I'm unsure what committee, how a person, this is a special committee, right? So when this committee is completed and the bylaws are amended and or approved, then it's retired, correct? So at what committee would an individual present their amendments? So that's one question. And the second, go ahead. The second question is, I believe that what Sean said was if there's a quorum, an individual or a small group could present and support an amendment, and then it would be voted on to go to the executive committee for review and possible recommendation or possibly not. And then if it's recommended out of the executive committee and returned to the full board, then it's a 2/3 or maybe 3/4, whatever we deem to be the threshold. So I wanted to confirm what the mechanism, once this committee is dissolved, would be for an individual or a small group. Because I think Nikki has a point that even if it's a crazy idea, or an idea that had occurred to no one else, it may really be something worthy of a conversation. But I don't know what committee that would go through in order to go back to the board for ratification. Thank you.
I latched on to one thing you said there, Anne, about the 2/3 or 3/4. Are you just referring to how the majority vote as it's written now plays out, or are you suggesting we revisit that that component? Does that make sense?
So I think that we need to define, I would like to see us define better the process of how and when a member or a small group, 5, 10, 15, whatever that number is deemed to be, what committee it would come out of, right? Where is it discussed and how does it come before the board so that it receives some level of support that warrants its being referred to the executive committee. So I think I'd like to have the mechanism and that number clarified. And then as a group, we can also determine after the executive committee has reviewed and recommends it back to the board, the full board. And actually, we only need a quorum, so it's 24 or is it 26? So how do we deem what the count is of votes to ratify it? Do you see what I'm
Ratified
saying?
is a majority of the full
I'm
board.
just trying to think mechanism and numbers. So whether it's 2/3 or 3/4, I'd like to have a better sense of interest, where the group is interested sufficiently so that it can be considered. And then it goes to the executive committee. Upon recommendation, it would come out and then, but what are those numbers? And what is the committee that would handle it when it's first brought up? Would it be in a regular board meeting? Or is that too disruptive? So I'm just not clear on some of that process.
Gotcha. Yeah, there is a little murkiness,
Thank
at
you.
least at the moment. I'm trying to sketch something out, but there is a murkiness in terms of getting it on the agenda. I don't think we've thought about how that would happen yet. But I think at least at the moment, I think what we're saying is someone can make a motion, I want to amend the bylaws. If it gets sufficient support, basically, we have a quorum and there's a majority present that vote to proceed, then there's a special committee created, which like in this case would be the bylaws committee, to develop the amendment proposal. Then it goes, once the amendment proposal is in place, that gets reviewed by the executive committee prior to being presented to the full board. And then from there, it basically, the proposal is provided to the full board with 10 days written notice. That's basically how it stands now, obviously subject to revision. But Glenn, you have your hand up.
Yeah, two thoughts. One is, I like the idea of a 2/3 majority for the final ratification. I think that really makes a lot of sense. But also, why don't we have it that can come out of any committee? So Nicole was concerned, where am I going to find 5 people? But everybody is assigned to a committee. And if you have an idea and you bring it up in your committee meeting, and then from there it can get onto the agenda for a full board meeting to follow the process. So an amendment, proposal to amend these bylaws may be presented out of any committee to the board. Something like that.
Okay. Thanks.
I'm not crazy about the idea that anyone at any time in any monthly meeting can make proposals as a single individual, because it can get a little messy if somebody is trying to do that for some reason.
Well, we
So-
haven't figured out how to get that, like what they need to do to get that on the agenda, right? So that's one component.
Well, right now, you're saying that anybody can do that at any time, at any meeting. So to initiate the process, and the process, of course, is to get people to agree to it, to then go back and a multi-step process. But the initiation of the process hasn't been designated. And I think if you say it can come out of any committee, well, then whoever comes up with the idea in their committee meeting or going to some other committee, and if they can convince people of the committee it's a good idea by consensus, then it gets on the agenda and it's brought for the full board, and that initiates the process that you've been talking about.
Okay.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
I guess, that with regard to committees, there might be a reason, as kind of happened here, there might be reasons to amend the bylaws that, just are not related to necessarily any committee. So it just makes it a little strange to tie it into the committees,
Yeah.
at least in my mind. I see Sean, you have your hand up.
I agree. I was thinking just that, Steve. It gives too much opportunity for the committees to go off committee topic, but there might be a way to just fold it into the special meetings. I scrolled up to look at the special meetings section, and maybe something could be added that another sort of impetus for calling a special meeting is by request of a board member who wishes to entertain a bylaws amendment. And then that would also fold into the special. I think there has to be 20% of the board has to join into that request for the special meeting. And again, the special meeting would be a request for a bylaws amendment. And then that addresses Glenn's concern that at every board meeting, somebody's gonna request that everybody gets a pony at every board meeting. And it also keeps the committees from getting off topic if somebody just has an idea about the bylaws that has nothing to do with education, libraries, cultural affairs. Do you
But
wanna
are you suggesting we'd have to call a special meeting if someone wants to amend the bylaws?
Yeah, I guess I am.
Yeah.
I like that.
I mean, there's a twofold way of doing it. I think special meeting is one, and then or it can be proposed at an executive committee meeting. The thing is, I was only gonna suggest that, except the executive committee meets sometimes 3 times a year if the executive committee doesn't meet regularly. So it could be either an executive committee or by virtue of a special meeting.
That I can go along with, either a special meeting or via the executive committee. I'll think about how to language for that. Shahid, you have your hand up?
It doesn't make it too easy, but yet there is a mechanism for moving it forward.
Right. No, that makes sense.
So there's in the special meetings clause, it says upon the written request of at least 20% of board members and presented to the chairperson. So there could just be language in there. I mean, I guess the language could go down at the bottom that additional bylaws committee amendments can be considered through the mechanism of special meetings, see above.
Shahid, you have your hand up?
Yes, actually, we need to understand, first of all, that we establish a bylaws committee. In a meeting, we ask, or community board asks, anybody who are interested in a bylaws committee. So maybe 6, 7, 8, 10 people raise their hand and they become a committee.
Has joined the meeting.
So I think,
Go on.
so I think we give full freedom to that committee first, that those 10 people come together, sit together, meet and decide or recommendation. After that, other board members come and they can give their suggestions. Like last meeting, I was not in the last meeting. and now I'm in the meeting. So I don't know what happened in the last meeting. So that's, I think we are overlapping our work and we are making so many confusions. So I think if first bylaws committee decide, and after that they come to the other board members and we can give you our suggestions. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, we're saying it's a special committee, which is the term of in the bylaws. So, but I think basically, yeah, I think you're right. Basically the bylaws committee is the one that has to, do the heavy lifting, as we've learned.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Chief. All right, so I'm not saying this language is perfect and, it's all subject to revision, but I'll read out what I came up with based on the comments I've been hearing. A proposal to amend these bylaws may be presented to the board so long as it is introduced via a special meeting or by the executive committee. If the board votes to proceed with the amendment process, a special committee will be established by the chairperson to develop an amendment proposal. Any such amendment proposal shall be reviewed by the executive committee prior to being presented to the full board. Bylaws may be amended by a majority vote of all board members after at least 10 calendar days written notice to the membership of the board setting forth the proposed amendments. And that the majority, I know there was comment, maybe it should be 2/3, but for now we're saying majority vote. Any discussion of that? Any language cleanup? Anywhere I went off base on any of this stuff? No one? I don't know if Carl can raise his hand being on the phone, so, and I guess Carl joined late, so you might not have much to add. But
Steve, I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
It's just about the 2/3 or the majority. If there's some way of polling the whole group to find out how people feel about that.
So if we made it, so it's a tricky concept because usually when we say majority, it's majority of those present. But in this case, it's majority of all board members. So when you say 2/3, do you mean 2/3 of all board members, or do you mean 2/3 of those present?
No, 2/3 of the full board, whatever number that would work out to be.
But that's not what Robert's rules, I mean, that language, when it says 2/3, refers to 2/3 of board members' presence, assuming a quorum. So if we had 30 board members at a meeting, which is pretty much the minimum we tend to get, that means we'd need 20 to approve something. If we're saying we need the majority of all board members, right now that means 24, and when we have a full complement, it means 26. So numerically, these aren't extremely different numbers.
Yeah, I kind of like the usual Glenn outlook of, if it's something that we've had in there before, keep it in unless there's a reason to change it. And I think like by making it more difficult to, like, we don't have a reason to come in here and say, oh, now that we've amended the bylaws, it should be more difficult to amend because we've done such great work here, and everyone doing this in the future, it should be harder for them. So yeah, I kind of think we may as well stick with what we got. I think a lot of the discussion came because we kind of realized, oh, this is a majority of all board members. It's not just majority of those present, which is what we're used to. But I do hear the notion that Robert's rule, it's different than what Robert's rules says, but it is in our bylaws. I think unless there's a good reason to change it, it seems like, at least to me, that we may as well keep it as is.
Hey, Sean convinced me. I agree.
I tried to convince you too.
Well, you seconded it. I agree with both of you.
Thank you, Glenn. All right. Any other comments on this?
There's a question in the chat from Michelle. I'm not sure I understand the thrust of it, though. Is this, Michelle, can you unmute to ask?
Yeah, I was responding to where Sean, you put in the chat that the reason why the committee was formed. So my question was, is this committee addressing those questions, or are they revising the whole document?
Right, so all of the above.
Okay.
It was decided by the committee that the questions that arose were important, but that the entire document was worthy of review and proceeded.
Okay. Okay, it's also my understanding that in order for, just based off of the city charter, in order for the board to do any business, you must have 26 people. You must meet quorum to do any business. So the percentage and what have you, if you're conducting business, it must be 26 members present to vote on any particular item. Just based off of what I've dealt with,
Right,
what the charter is concerned.
that's the number when we have 50 appointed members to the board. A quorum is a majority of the board. Right now, we only have 46 members of the board, so for us, quorum would be 24.
No, that's, may he rest in peace. We had that question before Lou Felder, and he said quorum for any board is half plus one to do any business, because your original number is the number that you stand by. So the original number of members we're to have is 50, regardless if we have the 50 or not. In order for us to do business, it still has to be half plus one of the 50, which is 26.
The issue is we don't have 50 members right now. We have
Right,
fewer
so
than
you
that.
still need 26 members in order to make quorum, because your number, whether you have them physically or not, the number of members you're supposed to have is 50, and that's across the board. That's according to the charter. So 26 members allowed you to do business.
Okay.
I want to see the language on that, because that's not how we've been operating.
It's my understanding. As I said, may he rest in peace, because that came up before for us when I was on another board.
How we've been, for how we've been operating, it's moot, because we haven't had a single full board meeting with fewer than 26 people. But I can certainly get that confirmed by council tomorrow.
I just pulled up. Well, I hope this is right, but at least Googling it online, it seems like if the board is below 50, the quorum is based on half plus one of the board membership. But Michelle, please by all means look into it and let us know if you find something else.
No worries, no worries.
Thank you.
I can do that, not a problem.
Nikki, you have your hand up?
Actually, reverting to like the beginning of Michelle's question, and this is actually sort of why I asked, and is there, because for instance, Sean, did the chair say review the bylaws to answer these questions, and then the committee was like, actually further review would be beneficial? I'm not asking this question to criticize or dissect the work of the committee at all. I'm thinking about in this amendment portion, do you need to have something that controls the scope of the work that the committee does when it's called together, right? So like in my experience at my job, when we call a committee, the CEO has to give a charter, which governs the scope of the, like a special committee, it governs the thing, right? So I guess that's what I'm just asking. Is there any, I'm not saying I prefer one option or the other, but would it be useful to add any language that said, and the committee will be given a specific, oh, Steve, this is such a hallmark moment. Sorry. I'm like, I don't want to interrupt the bedtime hugs.
No, continue.
But like, is it worth saying like, and the whoever is in charge here will, give the special bylaws committee a charter or something like that? Because otherwise someone could ask a very simple question and be like, I would like to call a committee to review, point X, and then an entire overhaul is done again. And that really wasn't perhaps the original intent of ever calling it together. So Michelle, I think that question's interesting, and I was kind of thinking about the same problem. I don't know if I rambled a little bit there. I'm basically saying, should the amendment text require that if a special bylaw committee is formed, that they have a charter that defines the scope of work of their review?
Do you have any specific language you'd propose in that sentence just to help me out a little bit? And
All right,
you know, I
let me
apologize. I
read.
apologize. I apologize for my daughter getting scared of the weather
Alright.
in the middle of your speaking.
Oh, I'm scared of the weather too. It's very rainy. Can you just move your cursor for a sec so I can reread this
Yeah,
really
sorry.
quick?
Yeah, go for it.
That's okay.
I think Robert's rules did allude to this. The difference between a bylaws revision and a bylaws amendment. So I think that's the distinction that Nicole is suggesting gets articulated.
That's
Yeah, the
correct.
only, sorry, go,
No, I said that she's right. It does make allowances for it. But there's a difference between going into various sections of the document and making revisions and revising the whole body. When you revise the whole body, that opens a can of worms, as you can.
Yeah, as of now, this section is intended to deal with both. So if we wanted to spend more time and divide up different processes for either or, we could, but hopefully we can come up with something that works for both, either, you know, a total overhaul or for something more specific to a specific section. But
if I were to add any language, all I would say is in that it would say a special committee will be established by the chairperson, then like comma, with a charter, comma, to develop an amendment proposal. And I'm using the word maybe I'm using the word charter in the wrong way, but when I say charter, what I mean is a scope of work, like an assigned scope of work that's agreed upon for the committee.
okay. Let me think about this. And Shahid, did you have another comment? I don't know if you're on mute, Shahid. I don't know if your hand was up from before or not.
No, thank you.
Okay. I hear what Nikki's saying, though. I think, again, if there's some sort of revision that's kind of minor, I'm not sure if we necessarily need a formal document being given to the special committee, but I'm open-minded if someone wants to tell me that it should be required in all circumstances. No one has their hand up. Sean, I'll call on you. Do you have any thoughts on if this should be further modified based on Nikki's suggestion? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I mean, I think that Nikki's suggestion does address the concern. If other members of the committee share the concern, it doesn't hurt anything to put it in there. And then I think to make the distinction between this is the mechanism for an amendment to the bylaws, but a revision of the bylaws falls back onto the chair to name a special ad hoc committee as she or he deems necessary. So maybe we could break this up into amendments, and then there could be a part 13 revisions, and that just goes back to the chair appointing a committee as deemed necessary for full revision. Does that make sense? Does that help make the distinction and make the process for one less onerous than the process for the other?
Well, I have a suggestion.
Go for it, Glenn.
Just the word specific. So a special committee shall be established by the chairperson to develop a specific amendment proposal with scope set out by the chairperson. So that just limits it, just saying, you can't go off the deep end and go in any which direction with these amendments, something very specific to work on. It's just a single word to add.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Thanks, Glenn. Anne, you have your hand up? You're on mute. I'm not sure if you're trying to speak, Anne.
Oh, that, yeah, sorry, Steve. So on the first sentence,
Yep.
that reads, a proposal to amend these bylaws may be presented to the board so long as it is introduced via a special meeting or by the executive committee. So going back to what is the mechanism? So we said it can't come out of any committee specifically, right? We're not tasking it to a committee. I think Shahid was mentioning along these lines. But we decided, so that it wouldn't be so chaotic, that it would not come out of, it would not come out of all committees. So all committees don't have the individual right to request a special committee for the revision or for the for a change to the bylaws to amend it or to revise it. So how do you get that special committee started? So, right? So how
Are you talking about the special meeting? Are you talking about the special meeting or the special committee?
So a special meeting. So
there's
so how-
provisions up above for how to make a special meeting, which is, I think, yeah, it was an earlier suggestion regarding, I think Sean's suggestion to basically have, you know, a process whereby you would need a certain percentage of board members to get the process rolling, you know, or the alternative is do it via the executive committee. So
Steve,
that was the thinking.
does it help to insert the section to refer back to?
Yeah.
Proceed with the amendment process, a special committee as per section 7, big letter B, capital B.
7.3B, yeah.
BD.
7B3, is it?
It looks
Such
like
a
it's
7B, huh?
B. Yeah, it's
7.
B is special meetings, and then we went to,
7B, yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yep. Sorry, so Ann, does that help?
Perhaps you flashed off of it so fast, but so would the special meeting upon request then be appointed by the chair or the chair by the chairperson or by the chair of a committee?
The chair of the board.
So the board chair.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Only person with their hand up is Shahid. I'm not sure if that's from before or not.
Just want to add that instead of a special committee, we need to organize a special meeting and we decide whatsoever the amendment is approval or anything. So special meeting is better than a special committee. Thank you.
Yeah, for the initial process, yeah, I think that's what we're saying. That we have this special meeting process, which is a little more onerous. So it's, you know, it prevents Glenn's concern from coming to fruition of someone just, you know, being a troublemaker and proposing a bunch of amendments. So special meeting or executive committee. So yeah, I think that's right, Shahid. And then the special committee, which, you know, we're calling the bylaws revision committee, is what happened is the next part of the process. So I think I will read out what we currently have, and I open up the floor to further comment after I'm done reading. So it now reads, a proposal to amend these bylaws may be presented to the board so long as it is introduced, maybe so long as the proposal is introduced via a special meeting pursuant to the process described above in Article 7B or by the executive committee. But I stumbled on that one, so let's start over. A proposal to amend these bylaws may be presented to the board so long as the proposal is introduced via a special meeting pursuant to the process described above in Article 7B or by the executive committee. If the board votes to proceed with the amendment process, a special committee will be established by the chairperson to develop a specific amendment proposal within a scope set by the chairperson. Any such amendment proposal shall be reviewed by the executive committee prior to being presented to the full board. These bylaws may be amended by a majority vote of all board members after at least 10 calendar days written notice to the membership of the board setting forth the proposed amendments. Amendments.
Steve, I think you captured it very well. I would only say maybe just to make the distinction, since kind of going to Shahid's question, it says special meeting above, but what the chair appoints really is not a special committee, but a bylaws committee.
I just wanted to be consistent with the, because I don't think bylaws committee is defined, right? It's like we have the chairperson shall establish such special committees as they deem necessary. So I was just trying to be consistent with that language.
Okay, you can ignore me on that then. I also think that this language has gotten so specific that it can be used for both amendments and revisions, and there doesn't necessarily have to be a separate revision clause.
That was my hope. So hopefully folks feel that way, that, you know, this process works for either way. And I think it does get a little bit weird when, because, you know, you can imagine a situation where something's kind of in between, where it's like, it's like revamping like 2 sections, you know, does that count as a full revamp or just, you know, a small one, you know, get into a gray area. So I think the intent of the current bylaws is seems to be to capture all situations. And I think being consistent with that makes sense. Okay.
And I don't see any new hands up, so you may have completed the task here.
All right, so now if we've gotten past the hard part, maybe we have another hard part, I don't know, but I know right before we started, Joanne said there was something about the topical committees that needs to change. So Joanne, you want to have the floor and let us know an updated proposal for how the topical committee should change?
Hi, thank you. It's not, we really the main gist is that we have to sort of separate out the land use and housing committee from community environment. Is that where we had it?
Yeah.
Housing committee, yeah, it has to be separated out. It's just a lot. So what we came up with, so it'll be youth services, education, and libraries. So moving cultural affairs out of that. So that
Cultural affairs wasn't in there.
okay, good. Housing and land use is its own thing.
Okay.
Community environment will absorb cultural affairs.
Economic development.
Well, let's just let me finish dictating, and then we can go ahead and talk about economic development.
Okay.
Human services is the same. I can't move you, so I don't see it.
I just moved up.
Thanks. Transportation is the same. Community safety is the same. So it's just a matter of making housing and land use apart from community environment, adding cultural affairs to community environment, which is not a big lift, and then just discussing where we can put economic development. So we can, economic development can fall under many different purviews, as Sean has had noted to me. Caton Flats and the FABGAR, those proposals would be in land use. If we were looking at scenarios, small business services could be heard by community environment. So it's just a matter of whether the people in attendance today feel that we want to take economic development, which would include those examples, and put them in one of these topical committees, or if we just assign them as we go along to whatever is closely relevant.
Oh,
so not so bad.
Could we just, either, what do you think it would be too much to have community environment, economic development, and cultural affairs?
No, I think that as I was looking at that, I was thinking that might be the most elegant solution. That it would be, I want to think about the order a little bit. But, community and cultural affairs and economic development.
Okay. What
Does
do you
that
think,
feel-
Joanne?
Does that feel too shoehorned? I mean, I think it all dovetails with each other. And then if there is an issue that sort of pops out as not fitting neatly into that committee, we could do what we always do, which is either do a joint committee or do an executive committee to get it out of, you know, a single focus committee, or do a public hearing when need be.
I mean, that sounds good to me. I would just be cautious, you know, that when we have something as significant as Caton Flats or the FabGar project, or, you know, in as much as what could be the Sears property over on Beverly and Bedford, that, you know, community environment, like we make a distinction that perhaps this is more land use than it is community environment or economic development. So I think it's just a matter of making sure that we route these really big controversial projects into a topical committee that can absorb like all of the nuanced conversation.
And we totally can. And we can also, you know, and like I said, we can also do joint committees, and the chair can always name a task force or a special committee if there's, you know, if there's something. There was for a long time, some of you will remember, it was a little bit before I got here, it sort of faded out in my early years, but there was a task force on the junction. When you know, issues related to the junction were really kind of taking a lot of time and energy, so then it got task forced. So things like that, we're always nimble enough to address, you know, bigger issues that don't fit neatly into, you know, the more humble committee structure.
Right. So at the last meeting, I think it was Donald Loggins was there in the beginning to express concern about the community environment being combined with housing and land use. That would be a lot. So it's too bad Donald isn't here. I just want to make sure that, you know, it seemed like, you know, he was like, okay, you know, after we spoke about it a little bit, but you know, I just want to make sure, or it would be nice to make sure that the folks in community environment feel that combining it with economic development and cultural affairs is okay and isn't too overwhelming, but hopefully not.
And you know, we'll reach out to them. We'll reach out to him. But I think in the original framework that I had put together before this went to revision was taking into account sort of how hefty housing and land use is, and
Right.
it should just really be a standalone. So we'll reach out to him and make sure that, you know, that those co-chairs feel comfortable with this new framework.
Okay.
My guess is that he's going to love having cultural affairs tacked on.
Good.
That's me guessing.
Okay.
So bad. Not so bad.
Great. Okay. That sounds fine to me, and I hopefully did move the right agencies over. So I don't see anyone's hand up, but you know, it is a change. So if anyone feels differently, or you know, or just wants to give their blessing, feel free to chime in. All right. I don't see anyone's hand up, so hopefully that's all okay from and the current name, based on Sean's suggestion, is Community and Cultural Affairs and Economic Development. So hopefully that works. Okay.
Steve, I can also take a closer look with less tired eyes and make sure that the agencies fall under the appropriate committees.
Yeah, I think I did it right.
You probably did. Likely that you did, but just in case.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Talisha has a name up.
Yeah, go ahead, Talisha.
Hi.
Hi.
So I just wanted to mention that I did talk to Sean the other day about the Housing and Land Use Committee being my my top choice of committees to be a part of. So I just wanted to say that I'm all for it being all by itself without the community environment.
Great.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Talisha. Sean forwarded me the communication, so I'm totally aware of your preference.
Oh, good. Okay.
So that's good. So we handled that. I know that was although an issue we had discussed, definitely a lingering concern we had about that Housing and Land Use Community Environment Committee just having too much in it. I guess the next item on my agenda, because I did have some issues I wanted to raise. I'm happy to not raise all of them, so we can wrap up the meeting since we've gone through the entire bylaws. We should celebrate that. By the way, we did get to the end finally. I've lost count of how many meetings it's been. So,
Thank you, Steve.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
Steve.
steering the big cruise ship through the narrow strait with the storm behind you. Thank you.
We'll see how much of the storm we have left to go through once we send this over to the executive committee and then the board if we'll be sent back. But yeah, it is a nice accomplishment that we've gotten through the bottom after a lot of work. So thanks everyone for everyone's insightful comments and thoughts. It's really been eye-opening to see what was there and what we can improve and this whole process. So
Yeah, they thought we were a well-oiled machine before. Look out.
there you go.
Thank you, Steve, for all of your hard work on this.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Glenn. No, really everyone. It's definitely been a team effort. So, but I appreciate it. So Joanne raised the sorry, was someone saying something? No, okay. So Joanne raised the topical committees issue. Were there any in reviewing bylaws, and I apologize for not getting them out to the latest version out to everyone earlier than today to review, but was there any other sections that anyone wanted to circle back to that they weren't comfortable with, or in looking at anything that wanted to revisit? Nikki, I know you had comments initially. I think we addressed all of them. I don't know if there was anything you thought we needed to circle back to, or anyone else.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right, great. So just I do have some things I wanted to raise, circling back through the documents. So if there's anything else that anyone wants to address first, other than the topical committees issue that we just went through, feel free to raise your hand. Anne.
Thank you, Steve. Can you go back to page 1, please?
I can.
Page 1. Thank you.
Sure.
So under name, if you could put name a little lower so we see the letterhead, just drop it down a tad, please. Okay. Okay. So this reads Brooklyn Community Board 14. All right. Now under name, the name of the organization shall be Community Board Number 14 of Brooklyn, New York City, hereinafter referred to as board. Can we align the name with the letterhead, or do we need to change the letterhead?
Oh, because it says Brooklyn Community Board 14 rather than number 14?
Yeah. And also Brooklyn is later in number 1.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And it's prominent here. So just to sort of marry this with the letterhead.
We could also say the name can also informally be Brooklyn Community Board 14, Flatbush Midwood Community District. I mean, what do you think about something like that? Just so we're not being consistent.
Well, or perhaps Community Board 14 Brooklyn, which then marries to number 1 a little more closely.
The city usually recognizes us the other way around. Brooklyn Community Board 14. The borough goes before the word community.
So do we want these number 1 and the letterhead to not be in concert, I guess is my question.
So the name of it can just be Brooklyn Community Board 14. Take the NO out, put the Brooklyn first.
Okay. Just so long as we're not, doing anything the city charter says we shouldn't be doing or something. But I'm totally fine with that.
That's good. Clean and tidy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good catch, yeah. Anything else in terms of reviewing earlier sections that we dealt with in prior meetings? Anything else? Not seeing any hands. So nothing that none of my issues are anything super major, but you know, we've talked about certain issues. One thing I did flag before, you know, for folks who haven't printed out the bylaws, or you know, you know, don't have a copy, might be a little hard to follow along, but I never liked the way I feel like the discussion was pretty basic going through section 1, section 2, section 3. We get to membership. It's pretty easy to follow. I feel like there's kind of this moment in section 4 where suddenly we're getting into nitty gritty nominating committee stuff, and it's just like, you know, where is this coming from when you're just reading from the top? And I much prefer the way section 5 reads, the way it just defines officers, to kind of give you more bearing of like the organization, rather than, you know, jumping into this like nominating committee thing, which is a little you know, out of left field and suddenly goes very inside baseball. So my suggestion, and I've said this before, would be to flip section 5 and 4. Again, it doesn't do anything substantively. It would just be for, you know, just reading from the top, just to be a little, I just think it would be a little more reader friendly. So that was just one of the major things that stood out to me. And so
No, it makes perfect sense to not be talking about a specific committee that only is pulled together once a year before we talk about committees in general.
yes. So I will, unless if anyone has any objections to that, I'll flag that to flip, and I'll make a note to make sure there's no internal references that get screwed up if they're flipped. So anything that's referring to like section 4 something or section 5 something, make sure that gets fixed. Okay. Okay. Next thing that was on my list, we have a mechanism for, you know, attendance issues with regard to regular meetings. And we did discuss the issue about attendance and, you know, whether or not to revisit the rule about, you know, letter, you know, we decided to keep in the letter to folks who missed 2 consecutive board meetings. But one thought that came to my mind after, you know, I think after we got through that, and maybe after we got through the committees, should committee chairs, should absenteeism from topical committees that folks are assigned to, should there be some mechanism for letters, or should the committee chairs have you know, have some role in this? Just because it seems a little strange, like, you know, if like at the moment there's no consequences, or I shouldn't say no consequences, but this mechanism doesn't apply when topical committee members like just don't show up to their meetings. And, you know, if you have a small topical committee and folks aren't showing up, and other folks from other topical committees aren't showing up either, you know, you might not have much of a committee left. So I'm just wondering if we think, you know, if there should be something added to this with regard to topical committees, or I guess not any other committees, because that seems that would probably need to be dealt with separately. And I don't think for special committees or executive committee, that the issue really comes up as, or maybe for executive committee it does. I don't know. Maybe folks feel differently about the executive committee. But just if anyone has any thoughts, I'm not saying it has to be done. It was just a thought that came to my mind. And especially being a co-chair of a smaller committee, the thought came to mind. But I'm not sure if Shahid and Ann's hands are up for this or for anything else. Okay. Joanne, you have your hand up?
So that's a good catch. I mean, attendance is required for both general meetings and for committee meetings, and and more so, more important at committee meetings because that's where a bulk of the work is done. Even though the votes occur from the recommendations from the committees in a general meeting. So it's a good catch, and I think it's just as simple as adding where you have. I can't see because there's a little bubble there, but adding committee meetings to board meetings.
So what if we said from 2 consecutive board meetings or they're assigned topical committee meetings? They're assigned topical committee, does that work?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
That seems to work. If they miss 2 straight meetings of topical committee they were assigned to, they also get a letter. Right? We haven't defined topical committee yet, but it's capitalized, so you can refer below. Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in on this? Are we okay with that change? Okay.
Have we thought about dunce caps?
Well, Glenn, I know you're being funny, but but there is a way that other boards have handled this, which is by including the attendance in the co-chair's report. So, a reporting from the Education, Libraries, Cultural Affairs Committee. That committee is comprised of the following board members. The following board members were in attendance. So it is a sort of public, subtle flogging. And then it goes in the minutes so that it's in the records, the public record of who was at their meeting and not.
Yeah, I guess the good thing is we seem to have pretty good attendance at committee meetings. I mean, certainly, I don't know the extent to which folks who are assigned show up to their own meetings, but just overall, it seems like, it hasn't been it's not like these committee meetings are happening with only 3 people in attendance. So I suppose if later on there, if it ever became a problem, someone could propose a bylaws revision to that effect, but it doesn't seem like an urgent issue, certainly. Next one might be a little more complicated, but it might be worth raising because of the potential for the topical committees to be changing substantively this coming year. Should we allow a mechanism for topical committee members to switch committees during the course of the year? Right now, I don't think there's anything for that. I think, if you're assigned to, under the bylaws, you're assigned to a committee. We don't have anything about switching committee, although maybe it could be read to, the board, the chair could just say, okay, you're reassigned. Let me just pull that up. My concern was basically just with the committees potentially assignment happening at the beginning of the year, then these bylaws changing up what the topical committees are, and people want to switch. What we do in that case. Joanne, while I'm searching for language, you want to weigh in?
I think the exception of a mid-term reassignment with the change in topical committees, because we're combining and then creating new ones, it doesn't need a bylaw revision. This is going to be, a one-off until perhaps there's another situation where the bylaws are, ratified mid-year. So I don't think we need a mechanism in the bylaws to do that. And I think it's an acceptable exception in this case to reassign people or to ask people to resubmit their committee preferences. And that is, again, considering that these bylaws are accepted and passed by the board.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, it says annually the chairperson shall poll board members for their topical committee preferences. So these new bylaws come in, and it doesn't say when annually. I mean, maybe there's
No, it does. The chair is supposed to report the committee assignments prior to the October meeting. So that is in there. That's the time of year.
yeah.
Can I chime in? It feels like it's a little bit of a solution in search of a problem. Some committees only meet 3 times a year. That's the required minimum. They get 2 absences before they even get a letter. And you can just be like Glenn and go to all of the committees that you're interested in. So there's nothing stopping you from participating in a committee that might be of greater interest than the one you're assigned to. And there's no real punishment if you miss your committee's meetings. So I feel like it's also, we try to strike a balance in the committee assignments in terms of gender and ethnic, did I say them all? We try to just strike a balance on the committees. So when somebody wants to, also you get 3 choices. You're getting assigned, almost everybody gets their first choice. Some people get their second. At worst, you're getting your 3rd choice. So I don't know. I've said enough.
Yeah. Okay. It sounds like, from what I'm hearing, we don't need to do anything on this, and it'll just be, if there's a special reason for this time to do that, then it'll just happen, and no one's gonna, probably foul or anything. So that's fine. I'll skip this next one. Okay. I'll raise this, and I'll preface it by saying I don't think we should do anything for this one, but I just wanted to raise it because there was something that came up that kind of flagged the issue for me. But with regard to discipline and removal, we have provisions for removing board members and all that, but that doesn't address the ex officio members. For like anything, if the board is displeased with something our ex officio members do, so if one of our city council person did something, refused to step down, and the board thought the city council person reflected really poorly on the board by their actions, that there could be some form of censuring or what have you. Now, I raised this, but I don't think it's necessary. And I think if that circumstance happened where something like that, I mean, especially because it's awkward because city council people appoint members, so there's certain members appointed by whichever city council person. But I guess what I was going to say is, even I think if that circumstance presented itself, we could probably deal with it outside of the bylaws. I don't think we need a special provision in the bylaws for that. So I just say all that because there was the question raised earlier this year about what would happen if in the circumstance like that. Joanne, I think you had your hand up but took it down. If you want to chime in, you can. If not, that's fine.
I did, yes. We did have a situation where we may have had to make a statement or, take a position on a particular activity of a ex officio member. But the situation resolved itself within council before we had to make a decision. So I don't think it's a bylaw mechanism. Hopefully this is not something that's going to happen again or happen too often where we have to make a statement.
Right. That's true too. Shouldn't go out searching for problems if they don't exist, right? So yeah, and you're right. If something happened, it's not like we need the bylaws to do something. Someone wanted to make a motion, so be it. All right, so I don't see any other hands up about that. Let me just double check. All right, so the other things I had were pretty minor. If committee chairs step down during the term, I don't think we need to include something for that, but if someone else disagrees. Yeah, the other thing we changed, I think for regular meetings, it said in the current version of the bylaws, it said 3 days notice. We changed that to 5 days notice to match the special meetings requirement, but the city charter says 3 days. I think making it 5 days in our bylaws is fine. I mean, it's never going to be an issue anyway. We give more notice than that. So those are two things that are on my list, but I don't think we need to do anything about. But if anyone feels strongly about one issue or the other, I don't see any hands going once, going twice. All right. So the last issue is what do we do from here? So I think the once we flip, I go ahead and flip the sections 4 and 5 and make sure there's nothing else that needs to be changed as a result of that. That if we could present this to the executive committee and first before the board's October 18th meeting, making I guess I would go and make the pitch to the full board meeting, at the full board meeting, I guess with a clean and a red line version. But I think going to the executive committee first makes sense, just to see if there's any feedback from any of the folks on the executive committee who haven't been at these meetings. Joanne, you have thoughts?
So from here, we should motion for this committee to recommend that these amended bylaws be sent to the executive committee for review and recommendation. So there'll be a motion in this committee to recommend these bylaws to the executive committee. The executive committee will review, perhaps recommend changes from this ad hoc committee. Or if not, then their recommendation will be from one way to the other to the general board, and then we'll have to figure out how we're gonna disseminate this information to the full board so that they can absorb the redlining. And I see Sean's handed up. She probably has some great ideas on how that can be done.
Don't speak too soon. I actually still don't, I'm still sort of flummoxed by why it goes to the executive. There's no other committee whose recommendation has to go to the executive committee before going to the full board. So I'm a little perplexed by this additional step. It seems onerous and drawn out. I thought the whole executive committee thing was left in there at the end for when there's a new, a new amendment or a new process. But I thought that we had sort of gotten off of a preliminary review before going to full board, because this committee reviewed it so many times Steve can't even count.
Well, I mean, I don't have a position either way. I agree that it is a whole nother step and, a whole nother meeting that has to be convened. So if you think that this information will be deemed reliable by the general board in its package without any other oversight, I'm totally into it, because we don't need another meeting to talk about something we did in 9 meetings.
Glenn, you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think that if we would have put it before the executive committee and they were to take this seriously, that it may take 9 more meetings for them to go through it paragraph by paragraph. And I think that's not necessary. I think that we should present this, and it should be kind of an up and down or up or down vote by the whole board.
Most, if not all, executive committee members have been at least part of the process, have attended, 2 or more meetings.
That's true. Okay. That's fine.
We just need a motion to recommend these amendments, to the general board.
All right.
Okay.
I make a
Excuse me.
motion that we send this to the
Excuse me.
full board.
Michelle, did you want to speak?
I can't figure out, there's so much on my screen, I can't figure out how to raise my hand, and I apologize. I've tried every little thing on here, but my question is, will it be necessary, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, to send the new document to legal down at Borough Hall for their perusing before taking it to the general board, to make sure that there's nothing in conflict with the actual charter?
I'm not aware of any board ever having done that before. I can ask Tanya Cantlow, if that is something that they,
Just
that
playing
they,
devil's advocate.
yeah. I actually, I'm concerned about that because, you know, Borough Hall, it might be helpful to have that review, but I worry a little bit about this idea that they have some sort of agency over us. And we've had a little bit of tension on that topic before. So I'd prefer that we yield if somebody finds something that they do find in conflict and then we review it at that point. But I feel like we've been pretty careful about that.
Yeah, and obviously, if there's any provision that doesn't comply with the city charter trumps our bylaws. So,
Right, but if you haven't compared them to the new document, how would you know? Unless we vote on something and then it's challenged and then we go to this new body of bylaws and then they say it shouldn't have been like that in the first place.
yeah, I mean, for all we know, the
I'm
current
just
bylaws
taking
might.
preventive measures. I believe in prior proper planning and dotting my i's and crossing my t's.
Okay.
And I have been on a board that had done it before, as far as taking it. You're not asking Borough Hall for their blessings. You're just asking for their legal team to look to make sure that everything is standard and would stand up in a court of law against anyone that may take issue with something that's in it.
All right, so Sean, do you want to, I guess, place a call and see if there's anything we should be doing in that regard?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll follow up on that.
Okay.
We certainly didn't do it the last time we amended the bylaws, and it certainly is inviting another group in to make comments on anything they want at any time they want. I don't think it's necessary, so I'm against it.
All right. Oh, and you have your hand up. Might be muted though.
Yes. Well, I appreciate Michelle's caution. I think that recently we have had some pushback from Borough Hall as to the autonomy of the community board groups, specifically ours. And as a layperson, I don't see anything that is in conflict with the charter. And isn't there a section in there that actually defers to the charter?
I was just looking for that.
I thought there was.
It does say that the board can establish additional rules so long as they're not in conflict with these bylaws or the charter. I don't think there's anything specific that I at least based on a quick look that says the city charter trumps, but I think that's just a given. You know, we can't go beyond the city charter with our own bylaws. So
Yeah.
As I said, I'm just playing devil's advocate. I prefer to err on the side of caution if anything else, but a majority rules.
But I appreciate the gesture, and I can, again, I think these things can happen concurrently. While we are distributing the edited version to the board for their review for vote at the October meeting, I can be looking into how other boards have assured that their bylaws do comport with the charter, whether that's through Borough Hall, which at one point wanted everybody's bylaws to be standard and exactly like one another, or through maybe Corp Council. You know, we can certainly see how to put on suspenders and belts.
that's good. All right. Well, with that, Glenn, did you want to continue on your motion that you had started?
All right, make a motion that we send this to the full board for approval.
Did I hear a second?
Second.
I second it.
Great. All right. Took us a number of meetings to get here, but feels good. We'll see how good we feel after we hear what the full board has to say. But unfortunately, we do have a lot of board members that have weighed in here, so hopefully the feedback will be good. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. It's great to hopefully finish a meeting.
Are we voting on that
Before
second?
8:30. Clearly, there's good reason to finish a meeting before 8:30. But all right, well, thanks everyone for all the hard work tonight and as always, and have a great night, everyone. And yep, see you all in October.
Thanks for your leadership, Stephen. Thanks, Anya, for putting the meeting together and hosting it tonight.
Yeah, thank you, Anya.
Thanks.
Thank you,
Susan.
Anya, as always.
Thanks, Anya. Good
Thanks,
night,
everyone. Have a good night. Till
Bye.
next time.
Thanks, Sean.
Carl
Good night, everyone.
has
Thanks.
left the